Get off my land, or you'll forget every zero in your offer. Willow Kane's voice sliced through the night, her eyes locked on Owen Caldwell and Sheriff Kenneth Cobb as she held their lucrative deal over the flames. The paper curled, blackened, and turned to ash before their stunned faces. A bold defiance they never saw coming. Where are you listening from? Drop your location in the comments and tell us, what do you think happens next? Will Willow outsmart these powerful men, or will her stand cost her everything? Subscribe now to catch our latest stories and share this one to see who else is hooked. Willow, a breathtaking black woman with flowing hair, faces threats to her ancestral farm, unaware that her sniper-trained past is about to ignite a war. Stick around. Her fight will leave you speechless. Comment, subscribe, and let's see how this unfolds. The Georgia sun hung low, painting the horizon in bruised shades of amber and violet as Willow Kane stood at the edge of her 80-acre farm, her long black hair cascading like a midnight river down her back. At 38, she was a vision of quiet strength, her dark eyes sharp as they traced the familiar curves of her inherited land. A patchwork of pecan groves, cornfields, and red clay that hummed with secrets older than the weathered farmhouse behind her. This was no mere plot of earth. It was a legacy, stitched into her blood by her grandmother. A woman whose name still lingered in the whispers of those who knew her as a sniper who never missed. Willow's boots pressed into the soil, grounding her, as a faint breeze carried the scent of damp earth and something else, something acrid, unnatural. She knelt, her fingers brushing the disturbed soil near the eastern field, where the dirt lay uneven, as if someone had prodded it in haste. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. "The land speaks, child. Listen close, and it'll tell you who's trespassing." Willow's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the clarity of recognition. She rose, her gaze sweeping to the creek, where the water ran slightly cloudy, tinged with a chemical sheen that hadn't been there a week ago. Her grandmother had taught her more than marksmanship, vigilance, strategy, the art of reading a battlefield disguised as a farm. Beneath this ground, Willow suspected, lay mineral deposits, gas or oil, valuable enough to draw hungry eyes. She'd seen the signs before, in the stories her grandmother told of families pushed off their land by men with smiles as sharp as knives. Willow's beauty, striking and undeniable, was no shield against such men. If anything, it made her a paradox in their eyes, a black woman alone, breathtaking yet isolated, her long hair a banner of defiance in a town that preferred its women quiet. But Willow was no stranger to being underestimated. She moved with the grace of a panther, her steps deliberate, her mind a steel trap. That night, in the flicker of a single oil lamp, she drafted a plan. She contacted Marcus Tate, a lawyer 2 counties away, a man her grandmother had trusted with secrets that never saw daylight. Over a secure line, she instructed him to file for her mineral rights, her voice low, steady, each word a bullet chambered. "No one knows," she said. "Not yet." Marcus, his voice gravelly with years of fighting losing battles, agreed. The paperwork would be silent, buried in the bureaucracy of Franklin County's courthouse, or so she hoped. But the land had a way of betraying its secrets. Days later, a white truck appeared on the gravel road bordering her property, its tires too clean for farm work, its windows tinted black as coal. It parked just beyond the tree line, idling like a predator, sizing up prey. Willow watched from her porch, her coffee mug steady in her hand, her eyes narrowing as she memorized the license plate. The men inside didn't step out, but their presence was a signal, a ripple in the air that said her move had been noticed. The next day, another truck came, closer this time, its driver leaning casually against the hood, his posture too relaxed, his eyes too alert. Willow's fingers tightened around the porch rail, but she didn't flinch. She'd been trained to wait, to let the enemy reveal. The first direct approach came on a humid afternoon, the air thick with the promise of rain. Owen Caldwell stepped from a sleek SUV, his tailored suit a stark contrast to the dust that clung to everything else. His blonde hair was slicked back, his smile polished to a gleam, but his blue eyes held the cold calculation of a man used to winning. "Miss Kane," he said, climbing the porch steps uninvited, I'm with Horizon Ventures. We're interested in your land. Strategic rural acquisitions, you understand. His voice was smooth, but it carried an edge, like a blade wrapped in silk. He extended a crisp envelope, gold lettering glinting in the sun. This is an offer that respects your legacy, a chance to live free of this burden. Willow didn't take the envelope. She stood, her 5'8" frame unyielding, her hair falling in waves that seemed to absorb the light. I'm not burdened, she said, her voice low, each syllable deliberate. Owen's smile didn't waver, but a flicker of unease crossed his face as her silence stretched, heavy as the heat. Think it over, he said finally, placing the envelope on the railing. It's a generous number. He turned, his boots crunching on the gravel, but Willow's gaze followed him, unblinking, until his SUV disappeared beyond the oaks. That night, under a sky stitched with stars, Willow opened the envelope. The figure inside was staggering, millions, enough to tempt anyone. But Willow didn't pause. She walked to her iron stove, its embers glowing like a warning, and fed the paper to the flames. The offer blackened, curled, and vanished, its ash a silent vow. This land was hers in every root, every furrow, every memory. She stood, bathed in the fire's glow, her face unreadable, her heart a fortress. The line had been drawn, and there would be no retreat. The next morning, Willow drove to the Franklin County Courthouse, her truck rattling over cracked asphalt. The lobby smelled of old carpet and polish, the kind of scent that clung to places where time moved slowly. She slid her mineral rights paperwork across the counter to a clerk with overgelled hair and a name tag reading Derek. His fingers moved too fast, his eyes darting to his phone as he tapped out a message beneath the desk. Willow noted it, her expression neutral, but her mind cataloged the betrayal. All set, Derek muttered, avoiding her gaze as he handed her a receipt. Outside, the sun climbed higher, but a chill settled in her bones. Someone was watching, and they were closer than she'd thought. Back at the farm, the air felt different, taut, like a bowstring pulled tight. Willow walked the fields, her boots leaving soft prints in the clay, her eyes scanning for signs of intrusion. The land was still hers, but it was whispering now, warning of boots that didn't belong, of hands that coveted what lay beneath. She paused at the creek, where the water still carried that faint chemical tang, and knelt to collect a sample in a small vial. Her grandmother's lessons rang clear. Know your enemy before they know you. Willow was ready. The war hadn't started yet, but she'd been trained for it her whole life. The air in Franklin County thickened with an unspoken tension, as if the town itself had drawn a breath and held it, waiting for Willow Kane to falter. She stood on her porch, the morning sun casting long shadows across the gravel drive, her long black hair catching the light like polished obsidian. Her dark eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the horizon where the white trucks had lingered days before. The envelope from Owen Caldwell was ash now, but its weight lingered in the silence that had settled over her farm. A silence that felt less like peace and more like the pause before a storm breaks. Willow at 38 was a vision of defiance, her beauty a stark contrast to the growing hostility around her. She'd burned their offer, but the men who coveted her land were not the kind to retreat. Owen returned 3 days later, his navy suit unbuttoned at the collar, his brown boots smudged just enough to mimic a man of the land. He stepped from his SUV with a calculated ease, his blonde hair combed back, sunglasses dangling from his shirt like a prop. "Miss Kane," he called, pausing at the foot of her porch steps, his voice laced with a warmth that didn't reach his eyes. "We're offering you a future without burden. This land's too much for one person, especially a woman like you, out here alone." The words were a blade, cloaked in courtesy, implying her race, her solitude, and her strength were liabilities. Willow's expression didn't shift. She stood, her 5'8" frame a pillar, her hair cascading in waves that seemed to challenge the sun itself. "Get off my land," she said, her voice low, steel woven into every syllable, "or you'll forget every zero in your offer." Owen's smile tightened, a crack in his polished facade. He tilted his head as if weighing her resolve, then placed another envelope on the railing. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said, his tone dropping, a warning wrapped in velvet. "The world's changing, Miss Kane. Land like this won't stay quiet. He turned, his boots crunching on the gravel, but Willow's gaze followed him, unblinking, until the SUV vanished beyond the tree line. She didn't touch the envelope. She let it sit, a silent taunt, as the wind whispered through the corn. The town began to turn. Franklin, once a place of small courtesies, nods at the feed store, chatter at the gas pump, grew cold, its warmth draining like water from a cracked bucket. The clerk at the general store, a woman who'd once swapped recipes with Willow, bagged her flour and coffee without meeting her eyes, her hands moving too quickly, as if Willow's presence burned. At the gas station, old man Harper, who'd always joked about the weather, stiffened when she pulled up, his gaze darting to the ground. It wasn't fear in their faces, nor pity. It was the look of soldiers who'd been told not to get too close, not to care, because something was coming, and they didn't want to be caught in the crossfire. Willow felt the shift, a tightening in her chest, but she didn't flinch. Her grandmother had warned her, "When the world turns its back, you stand taller." The sabotage began subtly, like a snake coiling in the grass. One morning, Willow found her truck's front tire slashed, the cut too clean for a random act, deep enough to fail on the highway. She didn't curse or call for help. She changed it herself, her hands steady, her mind noting the boot prints in the soft dirt nearby, smeared as if someone had tried to erase their presence. She marked the spot in her notebook, a habit from her grandmother's training, and traced an alternate route on an old map, one that avoided main roads. 2 nights later, her waterline burst, the copper pipe snipped with a precision that mocked natural wear. Willow dug it up, her fingers caked in mud, and confirmed what she'd suspected: sabotage, deliberate and sharp. She boiled rainwater that night, her jaw set, and began storing reserves in sealed jugs beneath the porch. The final blow came at dusk, when the cicada's hum was the only sound breaking the stillness. Willow walked the goat pens, her boots soft on the earth, and found her oldest nanny goat, Maisie, lying stiff in the straw. Foam crusted her mouth, her joints swollen, her eyes dull with the unmistakable signs of poison. Willow's breath caught, not from shock, but from the weight of violation. She knelt beside Maisie, her hand resting on the animal's flank, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the ache in her chest. She buried the goat at the edge of the north pasture, digging the grave herself, the shovel biting into the clay with a rhythm that steadied her. She placed a smooth stone at the head unmarked and stood as the last light bled from the sky. The line had been crossed, and there would be no forgiveness. Willow returned to the farmhouse, her steps measured, her mind a battlefield. The house, sturdy despite its age, was her fortress now, its curtains drawn in precise rhythm, its floors swept clean of doubt. She descended to the cellar where a reinforced cabinet held her grandmother's legacy. An M24 sniper rifle, its barrel gleaming under oiled cloth, its scope as familiar as her heartbeat. She lifted it with care, her fingers tracing the stock, testing the weight, recalibrating the zero with a sniper's reverence. This was no relic. It was an extension of her, forged in the lessons her grandmother had drilled into her since she was a girl. The trigger speaks when words fail. She loaded a magazine, the click of each round a promise, and carried the rifle upstairs, placing it beside her bed. That night, Willow sat at her kitchen table, a single lamp casting shadows across her face. She opened her grandmother's old journal, its pages worn but intact, and read the coded entries, shorthand from a life of war, disguised as crop logs. The words confirmed what she'd feared. Her land held gas deposits, a fortune buried deep, and her grandmother had died to keep it hidden. Willow's fingers tightened on the journal, her resolve hardening. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for a legacy that refused to be erased. Outside, the wind carried a new edge, sharp and restless, as if the land itself sensed the war to come. Willow stood, her silhouette framed in the window, her hair a dark cascade against the glass. The town could turn its back, the men in suits could scheme, but they didn't know who they were facing. Willow Kane was no ordinary woman. She was a sniper's heir, and her land would not fall without a fight. The Georgia dusk settled over Willow Kane's farm like a heavy shroud. The sky bruised with clouds that promised rain but held back, as if the land itself were bracing for battle. Willow stood at the edge of her field, her long black hair tied back in a tight braid, her dark eyes scanning the horizon with a sniper's precision. The air carried a metallic tang, a warning that the men who coveted her land were closing in. At 38, Willow was a striking figure, her beauty sharpened by resolve, her movements deliberate, honed by her grandmother's relentless training. The sabotage, slash, tires, poisoned goats, severed water lines had crossed a line, and now the farm was no longer just home. It was a battlefield, and Willow was ready to defend it. She began her preparations at dawn, moving through the fields with a tape measure, compass, and a small notebook, her grandmother's voice echoing in her mind. Know every inch of your ground, child. It's your first weapon. Willow plotted sight lines and choke points, marking natural blind spots where the oaks thickened and the bluff narrowed. She worked with the rhythm of a soldier, her boots leaving soft prints in the red clay, her hands steady as she strung fine copper tripwires at shin height, camouflaged with straw and leaves. Each wire connected to a repurposed CB radio, rigged to send a silent vibration through her floorboards if triggered. A whisper of intrusion only she would hear. She buried shrapnel traps beneath false troughs, using old fertilizer drums packed with gravel and rebar, their triggers hidden under the guise of broken fencing. A single misstep would unleash chaos. Willow's farmhouse, sturdy and unassuming, became a fortress. She measured windows for blackout drapes, stitching heavy cotton to absorb light and conceal her movements. The barn, its red doors weathered by time, was reinforced from within, not with nails but with anticipation. She cleared the central corridor, stacking feed bags against the far wall to create a fallback position, and braced the doors with oak beams she'd kept for emergencies. Beneath the grain bin, she unearthed a rusted tin box, sealed with her grandmother's code lock. Her fingers, guided by muscle memory, spun the combination, revealing a canvas-bound journal and a laminated map marked in red grease pencil. Observation points, firing corridors, fallback zones, all in a cipher only Willow could read. She tucked the map into her vest, its weight a reminder of the legacy she carried. Her grandmother's M24 sniper rifle, a relic of wars fought in silence, lay in the cellar's reinforced cabinet, its barrel gleaming under oiled cloth. Willow unwrapped it with reverence, her fingers tracing the stock, testing the scope's clarity, recalibrating the zero with a sniper's care. The rifle was more than steel. It was an extension of her, as familiar as her own breath. She loaded a magazine, the click of each round a vow, and carried it to the old silo, her chosen nest. The silo's steel frame, rusted but stable, offered clear views of the road, the northern woods, and all three approach paths. She lined the platform with sandbags and a blackout tarp, cutting a mattress to fit the cramped space. From here she could see everything, and no one would see her. Willow's preparations extended beyond traps and rifles. She rigged solar-powered cameras, small enough to nestle in tree hollows and fence rails, their feeds streaming to a laptop hidden under a false drawer in her writing desk. She spent hours adjusting lenses, noting blind spots, ensuring every gate and tree line was covered by at least 2 angles. One evening, she found a scout cam in a hickory tree near the creek. Its camouflage good but not good enough. She pried it open, revealing professional tech with a secure uplink. She smashed the chip with her screwdriver, but the discovery sharpened her focus. They were watching, and she'd have to outsmart them. She reached out to Isaac Reed, a grizzled veteran who'd served with her grandmother, his voice rough over the secure line. Need heat signatures, tracks, anything crossing the timberline, she said, her tone clipped. You alone? Isaac asked, a pause heavy with concern. I'm enough, Willow replied, her voice steady. 4 square miles, stitched. I'll pull from my NOAA backup. Should be clean. She hung up without goodbye, her mind already mapping the data he'd send. Isaac knew better than to question her. She was her grandmother's heir, a sniper trained to turn silence into a weapon. Willow's final task was personal. She walked the fields under moonlight, counting steps, memorizing the crunch of gravel, the snap of twigs, the absence of crickets that might betray an intruder. She tested each trap, adjusting tension, ensuring no false triggers. The land was her ally, its contours as familiar as her own skin. She paused at the north pasture, where Maisie's grave lay unmarked, and let her hand rest on the stone. "They won't take this," she whispered, not to the goat, but to the earth itself. Her grandmother had taught her that a sniper's strength wasn't in the shot, but in the waiting, the knowing, the moment when the world held its breath and she became its pulse. By midnight, the farm was ready. Willow stood on the porch, her braid loose now, her hair catching the starlight. The air was heavy, the storm clouds closer, their edges silvered by lightning that hadn't yet struck. She felt the weight of the rifle in her hands, the map in her vest, the journal's secrets in her mind. The men would come. Owen, his suits, their muscle, and they'd expect a woman overwhelmed, outmatched. They didn't know Willow Kane, didn't know the fire her grandmother had forged in her. She stepped inside, the door clicking shut, and whispered to the empty house, "Zero wind." The words, her grandmother's mantra, were a promise. The war was coming, and Willow was its architect. The Georgia night pressed against Willow Kane's farm like a held breath, the air thick with the metallic scent of an approaching storm. From the silo's steel platform, Willow lay prone, her cheek fused to the stock of her grandmother's M24 sniper rifle, her long black hair tucked beneath a dark cap. Her dark eyes, steady behind the scope, traced the moonlit slope to the cattle gate, where shadows stirred. At 38, her beauty was a quiet weapon, but tonight it was her training, forged by a sniper grandmother, that made her lethal. The tripwires, cameras, and traps she'd set were primed, her land a battlefield. Owen Caldwell and his men were coming, their arrogance blinding them to the woman who'd been waiting her whole life for this fight. The first sign was a tremor in the gravel, faint but deliberate, like boots trying to mimic deer. Willow's pulse slowed, her breath sinking with the wind. 3 trucks crept up the drive, headlights off, tires silent on the mud. Their doors opened with practiced caution, and 9 men dismounted, their tactical gear sleek, their suppressed rifles raised. They fanned out in formation, moving like predators who'd already claimed the kill. Willow counted them. 4 from the lead truck, 3 from the second, 2 trailing in shadow. They didn't look up. They thought the night was theirs. Her first shot was a whisper, the bullet piercing the lead man's neck just above the collarbone. He folded into the grass, silent, his blood a dark bloom under the moon. The others didn't notice. Their focus was on spacing and stealth. Willow's second shot struck a man through the ribs as he passed a fence post rigged with a gravel mine. The wire snapped, and a burst of sharpened stone erupted, shredding the quiet. "Sniper!" someone shouted, and chaos swallowed their discipline. The formation scattered, muzzle flashes stuttering from behind trees. But their aim was wild, too high, too desperate. They hadn't trained for this, not for a woman who knew the land better than her heartbeat. Willow slid backward on her belly, descending the silo's ladder in seconds, her rifle slung tight across her back. She crawled through the irrigation trench she'd deepened, mud clinging to her elbows, her sidearm holstered at her hip. The trench was her vein through the battlefield, a path they'd never find. She reached her second nest, a crawl space beneath the hay barn, reinforced with sandbags and cloaked in burlap. Through the scope, she saw shadows bobbing, men shouting position numbers that meant nothing in her uneven terrain. She pulled the bolt, chambered around, and fired. A man dropped mid-sprint, his thigh pierced clean, tumbling face first into a ditch. He clawed at the grass, lips moving in a silent plea. Willow watched for a moment, then finished him with a shot to the chest. The silence that followed was heavier than the gunfire. A second skin draped over the fields. A flare trap ignited near the eastern fence, its white blaze exposing 2 men behind a firewood stack. Willow fired, dropping one. The other bolted, screaming into his radio. She shifted again, moving to the oak grove nest, her body low, her steps silent. Each position was prepped. A water bottle, a rolled cloth for her arm, a map scratched into wood. The truck spun their tires, retreating with the wounded. But 3 men had breached the house, their boots tracking across her hardwood like invaders in a sacred place. Willow was ready. She slipped through the north wall's broken siding, the smoke bomb in the oven already hissing, filling the kitchen with a thick white haze. The first man stepped on a mat rigged with roofing nails, his muffled scream splitting the dark. Willow moved like water, her shoulder grazing the breakfast bar as she ducked behind it. She struck the man's elbow with her pistol's butt, his rifle clattering to the tile. He turned, stunned, only to meet her knife, driven under his chin with a sharp twist. He dropped without a sound. A flash of light warned her of the second man, his bullet grazing her thigh, the sting sharp but not slowing her. She tossed a flare canister, its sparks pulsing red, blinding him. Willow dove behind the dining table, the rod she'd rigged above the doorway catching the third man, Owen Caldwell, across the temple. He collapsed, blood pooling beneath his polished jaw. Willow bound the survivors with zip ties, her hands steady despite the burn in her thigh. She dragged them across the yard to the barn, their weight heavy but her resolve heavier. Blood trailed in the moonlight, a dark ribbon marking her path. Inside the barn, she secured them to chairs bolted to the concrete, their wrists and ankles tied with paracord, their mouths free but silent. Willow stood, her silhouette framed by a swinging bulb, her braid loose now, her hair catching the light like a warrior's banner. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The recorder on the shelf above Owen's head clicked on, capturing every breath, every shift, every moment of their defeat. Outside, the storm broke, rain lashing the fields, washing away the blood, but not the reckoning. Willow stepped into the yard, her rifle at her side, her eyes scanning the tree line. The trucks were gone, the night hers again, but the fight was far from over. Owen and his men had come to erase her, but they'd met a sniper's heir, a woman whose land was her soul and whose aim was her truth. She whispered to the rain, "Zero wind," and turned back to the barn, ready for what came next. The dawn broke over Willow Kane's Georgia farm with a deceptive calm, the sky streaked with gold as if unaware of the blood that had soaked the fields hours before. Willow stood in the barn, her long black hair loose, framing her striking face like a warrior's mantle. At 38, her beauty was fierce, her dark eyes unyielding as they fixed on the three men bound to chairs bolted to the concrete. Owen Caldwell, his polished arrogance bruised and bloodied, sat among them, his jaw tight under a swollen eye. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and fear, the recorder's red light blinking steadily above, capturing every word of their confessions. Willow's thigh ached from the graze of a bullet, but her stance was steady, her grandmother's sniper training anchoring her. The night's violence had been a reckoning, but now the truth beneath her land was clawing its way to the surface. Willow moved with quiet precision, adjusting the portable light to cast long shadows across the barn floor. She didn't speak at first, letting the silence press against the men like a blade. The younger one, wiry and pale, shifted, his breath ragged through clenched teeth. "I'm not dying for this," he muttered, his voice cracking. Willow crouched before him, her gaze level, her voice low and even. "Who are you dying for, then?" He hesitated, sweat beading at his temples, then spilled. "Sheriff Cobb, Kenneth Cobb. He gets the names, the filings. Ellen Shaw, the registrar, delays the paperwork. They wanted your land condemned. Sand tagged a chemical spill to claim squatters' rights. Caldwell's the middleman, calls the shots for the muscle." Owen's head snapped up, a flicker of betrayal in his eyes, but he said nothing. Willow nodded once, her expression unreadable, and let the recorder hum. She stepped outside, the morning air sharp against her skin, and walked to the farmhouse, her boots silent on the blood-wet grass. The house, battered but standing, held her grandmother's secrets, and Willow knew where to look. In the cellar, beneath a false panel under the pantry, she found a rusted tin box, its code lock untouched since her grandmother's death. Her fingers, guided by memory, spun the combination. Her grandmother's birthday. The lid creaked open, revealing a canvas-bound journal, its pages yellowed but intact, and a small, unmarked flash drive wrapped in wax paper. Willow's chest tightened, not from fear, but from the weight of what she held. She carried the journal to the attic, where a single bulb cast a soft glow over her grandmother's old field desk, its wood scarred from years of war planning. The journal was a cipher, its early pages disguised as crop logs, dates, yields, fencing costs, but Willow knew better. She tilted the pages against the light, tracing faint red pencil lines that marked coded entries, a shorthand her grandmother had taught her as a girl. Hide your fight in plain sight. The words unraveled a chilling truth. Her grandmother had known about the gas deposits beneath the farm, identified years ago by an out-of-state drilling survey. She'd stalled exploration permits with forged maps and misfiled paperwork, buying time to secure the land's title. The entries grew terse, the handwriting sharper, as if pressed by urgency. One passage, dated a month before her grandmother's death, stood out. Met with Cobb. Promised to bury the survey. Can't trust him. The final entry, scrawled the night before her grandmother's single-car accident, was a warning. Cobb's meeting tomorrow. Brake lines checked. Be ready. Willow's breath caught, her fingers tightening on the journal. Her grandmother hadn't died in an accident. The truck, found crumpled in a ravine, had been sabotaged, its brakes cut to silence her fight. Sheriff Cobb had been first on the scene, delivering a folded flag and hollow condolences, his eyes avoiding Willow's even then. The truth wasn't just about the land. It was about murder, a cleanup to erase a woman who dared to stand in their way. Willow's jaw set, her resolve hardening like steel in a forge. This wasn't just her war now. It was her grandmother's, and she'd carry it to the end. She plugged the flash drive into her field laptop, its screen flickering to life in the attic's dim light. The files were meticulous. Scanned documents, audio logs, and a timeline of Cobb's dealings with Horizon Ventures, the shell company behind Owen's offers. One audio clip, her grandmother's voice steady but urgent, detailed a meeting where Cobb hinted at pressure from above to clear the land. Another file held land registry codes, tying Cobb to quiet purchases of neighboring properties, families forced out by forged liens or midnight threats. Willow's grandmother had been building a case, a shield for their legacy, but they'd killed her before she could finish. Willow's hands trembled, not with grief, but with a fury that burned cold and clear. She stood, the journal clutched to her chest, and walked to the porch, where the first raindrops of the storm pattered against the roof. The fields stretched before her, scarred but unbroken, their secrets no longer buried. Willow knew what she had to do. She returned to the barn where the men sat, their defiance crumbling under the weight of her silence. "You put me on a list," she said, her voice low, laced with something older than anger. "You had no idea what kind of name you were crossing out." Owen's lips parted, but no words came. The younger man looked away, his confession already damning them. Willow powered on the laptop, transferring the journal scans and flash drive files to an encrypted folder. She burned a copy to a thumb drive, her movements methodical, her mind racing. The evidence, confessions, documents, audio, was a weapon, sharper than her rifle. She sealed the thumb drive in a waterproof pouch and hid it beneath the azaleas in the west garden, a precaution her grandmother would have approved. Another copy stayed on the laptop, password protected, ready to be sent. Willow didn't flinch as thunder rolled in the distance. The men in the barn were pieces on her board, but Cobb and Shaw were the players, and she'd expose them all. She stepped back into the barn, the recorder still running, and faced Owen. "You thought I'd fold," she said, her voice cutting through the hum of rain. "You thought this land was just dirt." His swollen eye twitched, but he held her gaze, a flicker of respect mingling with fear. Willow turned away, her braids swaying like a pendulum, and locked the barn doors behind her. The truth was unearthed, a fire kindled in her bones. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning, and Willow Kane, sniper's heir, was ready to pull the trigger. The Georgia morning broke with a brittle clarity, the sun slicing through the mist that clung to Willow Kane's farm like a fading shroud. Willow stood at her kitchen table, her long black hair cascading over her shoulders, her striking face set with a sniper's focus. At 38, her beauty was a quiet storm, her dark eyes burning with purpose as she sealed 3 plain cardboard packages, each addressed by hand. The confessions from Owen Caldwell and his men, recorded in the barn, sat on thumb drives inside, alongside her grandmother's journal scans and the damning files from the flash drive. Her thigh, bandaged from the night's graze, ached faintly, but Willow moved with unyielding precision, her grandmother's training steadying her. The truth was a weapon now, and she was about to fire it. Willow drove her old truck, its plates swapped with ones Isaac Reed had sent as a half-joke last spring, to 3 post offices across different towns. She mailed the packages, one to a scrappy mobile newsroom known for chasing corruption, another to a state watchdog group that had sued Sheriff Kenneth Cobb's office twice, and the third to a retired federal prosecutor whose podcast dissected land fraud. Each contained a thumb drive, a transcript, and a note in Willow's measured hand. You don't know me, but you know the pattern. Here's what it looks like when someone survives it. She lingered nowhere, her presence a shadow, leaving only silence behind. The packages were her opening salvo, a sniper's shot aimed at the heart of a conspiracy. Back at the farm, Willow sat at her grandmother's field desk, the attic's single bulb casting a soft glow over her laptop. She encrypted backups of the evidence to 2 physical drives, one hidden in a hollowed-out floorboard beneath the hallway rug, the other buried in a waterproof pouch under the azaleas, and uploaded a virtual copy to a secure cloud hub run by one of Isaac's Nevada contacts, a man who asked no questions. Her fingers moved with the same care she'd used to calibrate her rifle's scope, each click a step toward justice. She dialed a number, her voice steady as she spoke. Lena Morris, this is Willow Kane. You've been tracking my land. Lena, a lawyer whose name carried weight in fights against pipeline corruption, answered with a calm that matched Willow's. You filed the mineral claim in Franklin. It stuck. Willow's reply was a blade. They came for me at night. I recorded everything. Cobb, Ellen Shaw, and a forged order to block my registration. They said I was always on the list. Lena's sharp exhale crackled through the line. Do you have documentation? She asked. 3 audio files, 2 names, land registry codes tying Cobb to LLCs. Willow said. I've got a confession that names the syndicate. Lena's tone shifted, urgent but controlled. I'm 2 weeks from filing an ethics suit against the Energy Land Board. This changes my case. Are you safe? Willow's lips curved, not a smile but a sniper's certainty. Safer than they are. They spoke for an hour, plotting like generals. Lena would file an emergency injunction, using Willow's evidence to protect her mineral rights. A press release, anonymous at first, would follow, authenticated by geotags and metadata. Civil racketeering charges would target Cobb, Shaw, and their network, backed by the confessions and Willow's testimony. By noon, the legal fuse was lit. Willow leaned back in her chair, the attic's wood beams creaking above, and felt the house settle around her, battered but unbowed. She didn't replay the confessions. Every word was etched in her memory, sharper than any tape. Outside, the field smoked faintly, the scars of the night's battle softening under the sun. Willow walked to the barn, where Owen and his men remained bound, their faces hollow, their defiance drained. She left water and food within reach, a heater humming low, but offered no comfort. They were evidence now, not enemies, and Willow was no executioner. Days later, federal raids struck like lightning, silent and precise. Black SUVs rolled through back roads, hitting 7 sites in under 30 minutes. Estates, a private airstrip, a fake real estate office, and homes of state energy board members. Agents carried warrants, seizing servers and unfiled paperwork that unraveled a web of bribes and shell companies. Willow didn't watch the news. She sat at her grandmother's desk, her hand resting on the old field radio, its static a faint pulse. Isaac's voice came through, rough but steady. Cobb's running. Rented SUV, fake passport. Won't get far. Willow nodded, though he couldn't see. Copy, she said, and set the mic down. Cobb was caught at a county line, his suitcase stuffed with burner phones, foreign cash, and a map with border crossings circled in red. Willow's name was scrawled on a list, marked in red ink. A target, not a person. He didn't fight the cuffs, his eyes fixed on the trees as if they'd offer escape. They didn't. Back at the farm, federal agents arrived at dawn, their boots soft on the gravel. Willow met them at the gate, unarmed, a folder of passwords and digital keys in hand. 3 inside, she said, pointing to the barn, her voice calm. All armed when they came. All alive now. The agents nodded, processing the captives without fanfare. Owen, his jaw still bloodied, gave a deposition within 48 hours, trading his knowledge for a lighter sentence. His testimony sealed 3 indictments, accelerating subpoenas against energy commissioners. At the courthouse, Willow's paperwork, once stalled by Shaw's delays, sailed through. Her mineral rights were secured under federal protection, a rare clause in the Whistleblower Land Security Act invoked for her ordeal. The land was hers, irrevocably. Lena called, her voice bright with victory. "We've got them, Willow. Cobb's arraignment is closed, but the case is breaking wide." Willow stood on her porch, the wind whispering through the corn, and felt the weight lift, not from her shoulders, but from the earth itself. She'd fought not just for her farm, but for her grandmother's name, for every family whose land had been stolen in silence. The reckoning was here, and Willow Kane, sniper's heir, had pulled the trigger that brought it down. The Georgia sun hung low over Willow Kane's farm, casting amber streaks across fields that bore the scars of battle, but stood unbroken. Willow walked the western acres, her long black hair flowing like a river in the breeze, her striking face etched with quiet resolve. At 38, her beauty was a beacon, but her strength, forged by her grandmother's sniper training, was her true legacy. The federal raids had shattered the conspiracy that sought her land, and Sheriff Kenneth Cobb's arrest had sent ripples through Franklin County. But Willow's fight was far from over. Her evidence, confessions, documents, her grandmother's journal, had sparked a national reckoning, exposing a pattern of land theft targeting black families. Now, as volunteers hammered nails into a new shed, Willow was building something enduring, a legacy to protect what was hers and others like it. The farm hummed with purpose. Veterans, their tool belts heavy, worked without fanfare, their hands steady from lives spent in service. They didn't ask about the night of gunfire or the blood that had soaked the earth. They saw it in the repaired fences, the patched barn doors, the way Willow's dark eyes lingered on the horizon. The new shed rose swiftly, its pale boards a contrast to the weathered ones. But Willow ran her hand along the grain, feeling the promise of renewal. Beyond it, a low, broad structure was taking shape, a retreat for veterans, its wide porches and open halls designed for healing, not hiding. Willow envisioned a place where those carrying unseen scars could stand on solid ground, as she had. She paused at the garden's edge, where a new pup, Ember, bounded through the rows, his brown fur a blur as he chased a butterfly. His bark, too big for his frame, sent birds scattering, and Willow's lips curved, not a full smile, but a flicker of warmth. "Ember," she called, her voice calm, and he skidded to her boots, tail thumping. She crouched, stroking his head, her cane, a recent addition to ease her healing thigh, resting against her knee. "You'll learn," she murmured, her words soft but weighted, echoing her grandmother's lessons. "Everything worth protecting takes time." Ember tilted his head as if he understood, and Willow rose, her gaze sweeping the land that had held her through fire. The national scandal broke like a storm. Willow's evidence, amplified by Lena Morris's legal precision, revealed a syndicate that had stolen land from 7 black families across 3 states, using forged deeds and staged condemnations. Headlines called it a land theft conspiracy, but Willow saw it as history repeating, silent erasures dressed in paperwork. She refused most interviews, wary of being turned into a symbol, but agreed to one, filmed on her porch with Ember at her side. "They came for what's buried," she said, her voice steady, her hair catching the wind, "but forgot the history in the soil." She spoke of deeds filed late, signatures forged, families pushed out without a shot fired. Her presence, unsoftened, unapologetic, resonated, the footage spreading like wildfire, not as a hero's tale, but a call to see the pattern. Lena visited often, parking under the willow tree that leaned over the gravel drive. She brought updates, legislation drafts, land rights victories, sometimes just cornbread and coffee. On the porch, they sat without urgency, watching the sun sink, their silence a bond forged in battle. Lena shared news of the Kane Land Trust, founded with Willow's federal settlement from her protected mineral rights. The trust's mission was stark, to locate, defend, and preserve black-owned farmland across the South. No speeches, no cameras, just legal firepower and ironclad deeds. Already it had saved 3 farms in neighboring counties. their owners' names added to a ledger Willow kept in her grandmother's desk. One evening, Lena handed Willow a letter from a veterans coalition, offering her a seat on their advisory board. Willow declined, her voice firm but kind. "I didn't fight to sit in rooms full of opinions," she said. "I fought so the next black woman with a D doesn't need a rifle to keep her ground." Lena nodded, understanding, and they watched Ember chase fireflies, his barks echoing across the fields. The trust was Willow's monument, not a statue or a headline, but a living shield for those who'd been overlooked too long. Willow walked the fields each morning, her cane tapping a rhythm that replaced her rifle's weight. She paused at the creek, where the water now ran clear, and at the north pasture, where her grandmother's grave lay under sugar maples. She hadn't visited in years, not from avoidance, but because their bond needed no tending. Yet one dawn she went, carrying a flash drive, her grandmother's files, a final act of closure. She knelt, her knees sinking into dew-soaked earth, and slid the drive beneath the stone. "They thought I'd fold," she whispered, her voice steady. "But you raised a sniper." The headstone, plain as her grandmother had wanted, bore only her name and their mantra. "Stand quiet. See far." Willow rose, Ember watching, and felt the silence fill, not with grief, but with memory rising like a sunrise. The farm was no longer a battlefield. The rebuilt shed cast a shadow, its empty rifle rack polished but unarmed. A faded green flag, stitched with her grandmother's unit initials, flew on a short pole, a quiet nod to those who'd fought before. Volunteers came and went, their work a soft hum, trowels scraping, hammers tapping, boots thumping on dirt. Willow stood at the highest field, her gaze sweeping the open ground, then down to the house, then back. "I'm still watching," she murmured, not for anyone but the land itself. The breeze carried her words past the fences and into the hollows where threats once whispered, now silent but for leaves turning in the wind. Willow Kane's legacy was rooted here, in soil and steel, a promise that her land, and others like it, would never be taken again. Thank you for joining us on Willow Kane's unforgettable journey, a tale of resilience, legacy, and unyielding strength. What did you think of her fight to protect her land? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and share where you're listening from. We'd love to hear your take. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button to catch our next gripping tale and share it with friends to keep the conversation going. Your support fuels these stories, and we're grateful for every view, comment, and sub. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and we'll see you in the next chapter.